It's time to get your geek on with Dave Vermillion.
Alrighty, so let's go ahead and we're going to go now live with Dan Jurgens. Dan, how are you doing, sir?
Pretty good, guys. How are you tonight?
Dan, we are doing just spectacularly here. We are so glad to be able to speak to you tonight. I want to thank you first for taking time out of your what has to be an increasingly busy schedule to talk to us tonight.
Sure, happy to do it.
Alrighty, so Dan, you have been associated with Superman, which is the icon of icons for more than 30 years, whether you've been writing him or drawing him in over 225 Superman-centric stories. But I want to take you back to a little-known comic back in 1992. You know, it wasn't really, a big thing or anything. It was just the death of Superman. But when you were first told about that, what was your very first thought that you were going to be writing the death of this character?
Well, it wasn't, and I do sort of remember that now that you've jogged my memory. It wasn't so much a case of being told I was going to do it as much as it was a case of a group of writers and artists who were working on the Superman titles at that time, sitting in a room doing what we always do, which is try and come up with interesting stories for Superman. And in that case, we thought we could say a lot about the character if we did the death of Superman.
Well, that's certainly true. And especially the way that, you had to kind of construct a way to kill the person who's never been killed before. And I can only imagine what it was like to sit in that room and say, okay, guys, we're going to kill Superman. How do we do it?
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, that's a good point, because what we did is we went through the exercise. And first of all, the reason to do it, which was, saying a lot about the character, is it's just like when we lose anybody in real life or we see a notable figure die. That's when we talk about them and we discuss the idea of what they meant to us. And so we realized there was a lot we could say about Superman that way. The question was, who would do it? Would it be Brainiac, or would it be Lex Luthor, or some other villain? And we decided to come up with something entirely different and entirely new in, Doomsday, who ended up doing it.
Dan, I was just wondering about, was there any backlash or any shock from the powers that be at DC Comics about bringing the death of Superman, such an iconic character at the time?
No, I think as long as they saw that we were trying to tell a very legitimate story, that it was going to be this, not just a one-issue thing, that it was going to be something quite epic, where we would explore what it meant to the world without a Superman, and that they could really see it. I thought, at the time that we had something good, they thought we had something good. And more to the point, the nice thing about it was, as it became this big thing in popular culture, and we had newspaper columnists writing about it and saying, what does this mean when the world doesn't have Superman anymore? We had this weird and very lovely dovetailing of our fiction and the real world reacting to it and basically saying much the same thing we were saying. So it was really a lot of fun.
We're speaking with Dan Jurgens here on 9:30 a.m. The Answer in San Antonio and Get Your Geek On. And Dan, you created Booster Gold, another tremendous character that has a rich background in history. And the guy just got absolutely pummeled while he was off fighting Doomsday. I mean, it was bloody. He got battered in a horrific way. Can you describe what it was like seeing the character that you created from your own mind, and he's just getting trashed?
Well, there again, I wrote and drew that story, so it wasn't just a matter of seeing it as much as it was saying this would make sense. And really what we had to do is we sent the Justice League up against Superman, or up against Doomsday, rather, before Superman got there. And the whole idea was, if we were going to have a being powerful enough to kill Superman, obviously he would be able to plow through the Justice League as well. So what we really wanted to get into was the idea of this really incredibly powerful villain in terms of Doomsday, and that meant if Superman can't stand up to him, there's not much Booster Gold and the others could do either.
Very true. Now, Warner Brothers is kind of in a state of flux when it comes to the DCEU and the movies on the big screen, but if they ever came calling and they said, all right, Dan, who do you think should play this cocky time traveler on the big screen in his own standalone movie? Who would you want to cast?
Oh, gosh, I really don't know. I used to have an idea of who it might be, but now, we've probably moved past that point. And the idea really is he's fairly young. I mean, we're talking about someone who, in terms of Booster Gold, had just gotten out of college. He's really, probably about 23 years old. So I haven't really zeroed in on anyone yet. From time to time, I get different ideas, but right now I can't say that I have one.
Well, what was one of the ideas you had? I'm really curious to pick your mind on this.
If I were to go back a few years ago, one of the guys I thought would be really ideal for it, and this is kind of a left field thing, is Justin Timberlake, just because he had that sense of sparkle and he moves so well that I could see that translating well to the screen. And
he's no stranger to the big screen either. So he did that In Time movie. So that'd be tremendous. That's a great. I could see that. I can absolutely see that. Kind of shifting gears on you a little bit, Dan. Talking about the latest chapter in Batman Beyond, which was Rise of the Demon, and that featured a really conflicted Damian taking on Terry. They have their bat suits. These are new bat suits, and was there kind of an underlying message about maybe over-reliance on technology, because those two characters are fighting their suits about as much as they're fighting each other?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, certainly, I think all of us, I do certainly feel that way from time to time whenever we are sitting there looking at a computer screen that isn't doing what we want it to, whenever our cars don't do what they want them to because they're far too complex now. I think there are times when all of us say, life has gotten a little too complex, and just, I can't turn on my oven, but give me a match and I'll start a fire or something like that. And there is a bit of that, along with the idea that, to me, if you look at Damian and this idea that Bruce Wayne is his father, but Ra's al Ghul is his grandfather and Talia is his mother, I still say he's going to be someone who grows up to be a somewhat conflicted individual.
Absolutely. I mean, I can only imagine what he's going through on a daily basis, just trying to straighten all this out in his head. And then, of course, he's got to fight with Terry and with Goliath and everything else that's going on there. Now, the ending of that story, Bruce is recovering. Damian is certainly, he's recovering. Terry is in bad shape. And now Matt dons the Robin costume for the first time. What inspired you to finally give this version of Batman a Robin?
Well, part of it is because we've moved forward a couple of years in Batman Beyond's career. So not only has he gotten a bit older, but his younger brother Matt has as well. And one of the things that, if you look at comics and you look at sidekicks and you look at partnerships and everything else, what we really don't have much of is sibling heroes. So I thought it would be fun to play off this idea of, Terry and his younger brother Matt becoming this new Batman and Robin in a year 45 years, or in an age 45 years from now, because it gives us a way to take a bit of a different spin on the character. Historically, Bruce, until Damian, always went out and found someone who was kind of a stray of some kind, whereas this idea of an older brother taking on his kid brother seemed to me to be somewhat fresh, and I just thought it would fit the tapestry of the series very well.
Now, speaking of this, can you give us any insight, any hint, anything at all regarding the next chapter of this, where they're going to go from here? Because that certainly was quite the cliffhanger you left us on.
I think whenever I leave a cliffhanger like that, the idea is to keep everybody dangling and hope they come back around to read the book. So I think if you look at the way the cliffhanger was structured, there were a couple of pretty obvious directions that this might go, and that's going to be very much the emphasis of our next arc, which is just, what does this mean? Does Terry McGinnis as Batman really even want a Robin, especially if it's his kid brother? What does Bruce say about it? How does that all work out? And it is, is it a relationship that can really work? Because what we really see that's very frequent, whether it's a pair of sisters or a pair of brothers like that, they tend to bicker a lot, but there's a lot of love behind that. But how does that work in the sense of a superhero dynamic? So that's what we're going to explore.
Well, sir, now far be it from me to impose or make any suggestions upon you, but I would like to make just one minor recommendation. I'd consider it a personal favor. If you would, at no point whatsoever, make sure that the new Robin doesn't say, "I want a car, chicks dig the car." Please, just don't.
Okay.
No.
I don't normally jump on top of readers' requests, but in this one case, I can promise you.
Thank you, sir. I do.
That's not going to happen.
Now, the next 30 days are certainly going to be very big for you. You're currently writing and drawing 3 stories for Action Comics 1000, which will be released on the 18th, I believe. And
yeah, it comes out in a week, but I only wrote and drew one of the stories in it. There are a lot of really great stories in it, one of which I wrote and drew.
Okay, and your legendary run with Action Comics will conclude on the 2nd of May with The Last Will and Testament of Lex Luthor. So my question to you is, if you could go back and you could change one storyline, whether you're going to add something or remove something, and it may not even be your story, it could be anyone's in there at any point in time, which one would you want to change?
Actually, that's a very good question, and it would probably be a story that I actually did. I had done a story many years ago, prior to the death of Superman, in which there was a female reporter at the Daily Planet by the name of Cat Grant, and she had a young son who had been kidnapped at that time. And it was a story where Superman didn't succeed in saving the boy's life. And as I look back on it, I've always thought, I probably wouldn't do that same story again, just because it did represent a failure for Superman in a story that he should not have failed in all likelihood. So that's one I'd probably take back.
Now, my producer Goose here, he and I had a little bit of a bet going as to whether or not you would choose a certain look for Superman. And maybe that electric blue didn't quite work out.
No, because you know what's amazing about that is, to this day, I am amazed at the amount of people who come up to me and still have really fond memories of that storyline. And this is a story in which we gave Superman a bit of a different look and certainly gave him different powers. And for a lot of people out there, they really responded well to that story. They enjoyed it. It sold very well, and even now they tend to be those who are probably, like 28 years old, and they'll come up and say, "Oh yeah, that electric blue Superman. Oh, I love that look." And so I've had too many people say they really enjoyed it to say that we'd have to go back and take that one off the table.